Hello! Welcome back to my channel. If you haven't been here before, I'm Jamie B. I read a ton of books. This is my wrap-up video for January 2026. So I haven't really kept up with my 500 book goal yet for the year. I am 16 books behind according to Storygraph's math. So we'll see. But I did finish 33 books so far this year. It is a few days into February, so I'm just going to do all the books I finished up to now and then roll on with the rest of February. So I finished one book today that actually I don't think it's in the calculation yet. So 34 books as of now. The one I finished earlier today, I started it in January, which is why I'm just going to finish all the books that I finished up to today in this video, and then we'll move on. So the one I finished today, that's actually the first one of February, is this one, The Writing Life by Annie Dillard. I'm not a poetry reader. You guys that have been following me for a while know this. Me and poetry, we're not friends. So Annie Dillard writes prose primarily. I get the sense she probably does write some poetry because she talks about stuff that she wrote as poems and then rendered them into prose to publish them. I would believe that because her prose, it's like free-form poetry with a little more grammar than most free-form poetry seems to use. But, so there was some storytelling and some point to this book, but it was really just kind of pretty writing about writing. I know people for whom this would be a great read. I'm just not the audience for it. But I read it, and I have some idea what it's about, and now I can recommend it to the right people that are not me. So I gave it about 3 stars. But, yeah, I know people that probably would be more like a 4-star book. I don't know about 5 stars, but maybe. Yeah. I have not read any other Annie Dillard. So there are a couple books that she's written that are much better known. An American Childhood and Pilgrim at Tinker Creek are the ones that most people have heard of her for. And I've not read either one. I think I own both of those. And I know I have more of her writing in my literature section at the bookstore. And that's the bookstore I currently work at. If you haven't been following along, I am in the process of making a bookstore. At the moment, kind of waiting until I can meet up with my probable business partner so that we can work out some details. So, I want to get it started now. But I have to wait. I have to focus on other things. Anyway, so for the moment, if I'm talking about things in the literature section or the history section of the bookstore, it's where I currently work at a Friends of the Library bookstore where I am a volunteer. And I run the history section and the literature section at said bookstore. Anyway, so I know there are more because I shelved them, but I don't know. I'm not rushing out to read more. I might wait until they get donated to my own bookstore and then read them when I'm bored while I'm manning the cash register on a day when there's not many customers. Even the best of bookstores, there's still those days. So I think she'd actually be someone that I'd read better that way too. In the right atmosphere. The sun coming in through some stained glass or something, and kind of a cozy vibe, which I'm hoping I can make happen in my bookstore, because it would be nice to have a bookstore with a cozier vibe. So then I could read, bits of Annie Dillard's writing, which would lend themselves to that kind of thing, like just little cozy snippets in between customers or that kind of thing. I think sitting down and just reading a whole book of hers in one sitting, the way she writes about writing, I suspect she doesn't expect her readers to do that. So, yeah. So I might give it a second shot. If I read her other stuff and I like it better, maybe I'll get a taste for her writing. We'll see. The one I finished earlier today is War by Candlelight. This is short stories. So some of them are really good, and some of them I was still very confused by the end of the story. So the author is originally from Lima, Peru, and is now in the U.S. So his writing is in English, not in translation, and does straddle both locations. Let's see if it says any more about where he's at. So he lives in Oakland, in California. He was raised in Birmingham, Alabama, and he's from Lima, Peru. And he does incorporate more places in his collection of stories that reflect all of his life history, including some stories that are very pointedly set in Peru. And I need to read more of Peru's history, because there's some things in his stories that I got the gist of what was happening, but I don't remember those things. And so talking about a war, I don't know what wars would be directly affecting people living in Lima or wherever they are in Peru if they're not in Lima in that story. They weren't really very clear. So maybe it's a future war? I don't think so. Anyway, so as I said, it was a little confusing. For an international readership, I think it would be nice if authors that are writing stories like that would be just a little bit nicer about giving hints about, if we're talking about there's a war going on, which war? Like, a little bit more setting, just so that those of us that run history sections and do read a lot of history, but maybe not all the histories of all of the countries all at once, could have some clue about when and where we're set. So, and it's not the only author that I have had that issue with. There's a tendency in some literary fiction to be a little bit vague, as if it's almost like a memory test to find the readers that already know the history of their location, which is just kind of unrealistic. Anyway, so grumble, grumble, grumble. Anyway, it's probably about a 4-star book. I just finished it this morning, so I'm still debating, but I'm leaning towards 4 stars. I will probably read more by Daniel Alarcon. So there's his name. I know I typed it out in chats, and some of my friends that should have been able to pronounce Alarcon got really confused. Anyway, Daniel Alarcon. He is a winner of the Whiting Writers Award. Not a prize that I follow. I looked it up, but I don't even recognize half the books that they list. So, not probably one where I'm going to have a lot of them on hand. So, I'll start with the ones I'm already following. But still good. I can see why he would have been a winner, because his writing is really good. Just, yeah. Anyway, moving on. So one of the things that happened at the end of January is that Coda and Nicole started the read-along group buddy read thing for the Witcher series, for which this is the kind of the first book. This is the series reading club that Nakoda runs. And they're reading as a group with it broken down, third of the book each session. So it takes about a week to 2 weeks per book. So it doesn't take very long to finish the book, and so you have some leeway as to how long you're going to take. I finished this one actually in 2 days because I was listening to it as an audiobook. I since borrowed the book so I could wave it on screen from the bookstore because we got a copy as soon as I didn't need it anymore. So, I'll be bringing this back next time I go to the bookstore. But I at least was able to show it. But I did finish it. This is The Last Wish by Andrzej Sapkowski. So there's the cover. Last Wish. This is a set of stories, and it felt more like a Conan novel in that respect, where it's just kind of episodic things that have happened to our hero. But it does give a good introduction to the world and to the hero. And some of the peculiarities of what it means to be the Witcher. He's very much a Conan-inspired hero. I definitely saw some of the inspiration going into this one. And Conan is a classic. And I can't imagine that many authors writing in this subgenre have not read or watched Conan. So that's not much of a reach. So we start the next book, Blood of Elves, I think, will be the next one. The way they've lined it up. Tomorrow, I think. So I will be starting it. I have it in print. I didn't even have to borrow it. I actually have it. So that's cool. There's some that I still need to get. But I do have Blood of Elves. So there's that. So that will be tomorrow's new book to start. And I did just finish the Annie Dillard, so I actually am done with my current print book. So I will not start another print book so that one can be the print book. Anyway, another book I finished in January since my last update, The Bones of Time by Kathleen Ann Goonan. This one is sci-fi set in Hawaii, and involves kind of parallel universes and, physics technology-ish, involving consciousness and being able to flex in and out of different, dimensions of reality, basically. And I don't know how linked these books are, but I read Queen City Jazz. And that's the one that's mentioned on the cover on this one. And it definitely used the same kind of magic, or like science-y magic. It doesn't feel like science to me. I think because that thing, like the quantum consciousness stuff, I know that it's talked about as a physics concept. At the moment, it still falls in the realm of magic. There's no mechanism there. It's magic. So I would probably class this more as fantasy rather than sci-fi, even though it's dimension jumping and kind of time travel stuff. But it's more like the beginning of the Grand Tour series by Ben Bova, because it's much more about the social stuff around the new technology and controlling it, and the politics and sociology kind of stuff going on. So I thought that was interesting. And I do like the setting of Hawaii. And this one very much involves a character in Hawaiian culture, the young, like, last queen of Hawaii. So it's different. Still not sure I'd call it sci-fi, but if you like that kind of nebulous sci-fantasy stuff, they're really good, and they're very different because of the Hawaii. So yeah, because of the Hawaii, I know. Anyway, brain fried. We're moving on. Justinian's Flea, the First Great Plague and the End of the Roman Empire, by William Rosen. This is one I got from the bookstore. It had underlining, and I went through and was able to erase it. So I think it's clean at this point. When we get books in that are underlined or highlighted, if they're really bad, then we give them away on the free cart, or send them somewhere else, basically, because we don't sell them. It doesn't work out very well to try and get people to pay money for something that's all highlighted. Anyway, but if they're underlined in pencil, sometimes I bring them home and read them and have my eraser with me as I'm reading them so that I can clean it up. And I actually was able to find the audiobook for this one, so I was able to listen as I was erasing, so that was nice. I found it a little dense, though. For the topic being what it is, it's also... So the title, it's about Justinian's Flea. So it's tying epidemics with other things that happened, and like what had to happen in order for other things to happen later on in history. So I liked the concept, and it felt like it was trying to be this sort of story that's just storytelling that doesn't feel heavy. But it didn't quite get there, and I'm not quite sure why. Maybe they tried to take on too much. And maybe if it was 3 books this length to cover the same amount of material and flesh out the storytelling part more, that might have helped. So that may be it, because it did feel rushed, like we're cramming all this stuff into this one book. But if you listen to it slowly, maybe space it out over a week, and pause and think about each thing as you've listened to it, or each thing as you've read it. And it would be a good one for reading, where you're going to look up the background material for each section. And I thought about doing that, but I really, at the time, wanted to see, okay, without doing that kind of intensive study, is this a readable, like, storytelling book? And I think my verdict is that it would be better spaced out and with supplemental materials. As I do have people that want to get into reading history, and there are books that read almost like novels while being history. I usually recommend books by Mark Kurlansky, tend to be just really good storytelling, where you lose the sense that you're doing school reading, and it just becomes fun and interesting, and yeah. So he's really good at the storytelling. I'm not sure about this one, but good information, interesting how the connections work together. But if you are reading it and then pausing and looking on the internet, like Googling each thing and looking at pictures and stuff, it could be really fun. Anyway, I also did this one initially with my eyeballs up to that point, and then found the audiobook. This is The New Republic by Lionel Shriver. This is the author that wrote We Need to Talk About Kevin, which was really good. That one was about school shootings and an antisocial kid that becomes the school shooter and his family. This one, I didn't really get much of a sense of a good focused plot in this one, like what it was about. I tried. It's about terrorism-ish, but it was boring, which is why after I got to where the bookmark is, I tried, well, what if I just listen to this with my crochet so that I'm at least just listening to the story, because I was not staying focused on the page. So 3.5 stars, probably. I liked her writing in We Need to Talk About Kevin. In this one, I was even in the mood for literary fiction the week that I was reading this. So, not one of the better books I've read by her. I have 2 more of her books, too. So I'm hoping that the other ones are more like her writing in We Need to Talk About Kevin. So, if you have read The New Republic by Lionel Shriver, what did you think of it? Do I need to give it a second shot? Do I need to read it differently? Is it just one of those books that was kind of not her best? I don't know. Anyway, I picked up this one, A Marriage at Sea by Sophie Elmhurst. It's been recommended by so many booktubers that I had to try it. It is also on the BookTube Prize checklist for this year. If you haven't checked that out yet, go to the BookTube Prize website, and you too can get a PDF that's a checklist of all the books that are on the BookTube Prize nominee list that's being considered for the prize. That's the first stage of the prize. And you can read along. This one is actually one that's on the nonfiction list for that. It came out in Britain under a different title. Maybe it'll say what it was. Probably inside. Yes, it should be inside somewhere. Alternate title? Maybe. Is at least its alternate title? Yes. As Maurice and Marilyn, A Whale, a Shipwreck, a Love Story. So this is its US version, and I picked it up actually as my 6 hour. So as far as my getting coins for books thing goes, this one gets me a quarter. These other ones, the Lionel Shriver book and the Writing Life, I get a nickel for, because I got them from Bag of Books book hauls. The other ones just get a penny. It's very sad, but it's what it is. So Marriage at Sea is a survival story about a couple that gets stuck on a small boat with only the things they were able to salvage, unable to direct where their boat is going, just kind of stuck out in the middle of the ocean. And they survive a ridiculously long time before they're rescued. And yeah, so that's really what it is. It's a survival story. But gets into their relationship with each other during the survival. And I've never been a real fan of the survival story sort of trope. So it wouldn't have been my first choice anyway. So I'm leaning towards like 3.75 to 4 stars for it. It wasn't bad. It wasn't great either. It was just, yeah, it was okay. I can see why people really like it. But it's not one I need to keep. I will be passing it on to my sister. And then if she finishes it before I leave where I'm currently working, it'll go back to that bookstore probably. If not, then it'll probably come to my bookstore, and then it will be available at my bookstore for anyone that wants to buy it. But yeah, so the physical books that I have here, The Last Wish was a 5-star. Maybe a 4.5 star rounded to 5 on Storygraph, but it was good. The rest of these were all just kind of, they were okay, and they were books. But in January, I also did a lot of books that I read, or listened to rather, off of Hoopla. So those ones I had more success with. Let's bring it back to the end of the readathon. Okay. So end of the readathon, the last ones from that were The Sirens by Amelia Hart, The Book of Night by Holly Black. I gave The Sirens 4.5 stars. Book of Night was 3.75 stars. I really wanted to like it more than I did. Book of Getting Even was 2.75 stars. I didn't enjoy it. The Tenant by Frida McFadden was the book that I finished after the readathon ended. The readathon being the BookTube boot camp, which was the first 2 weeks of January. So The Tenant by Frida McFadden I finished after that, and it was a 4-star book. I have a friend at the bookstore who really likes Frida McFadden, and she was really excited I was reading this book. I've read other thrillers on this same basic story, and I kind of figured it out before it would have been satisfying to be just figuring it out. So it was a little too obvious for me, but I liked how she did it. It was fun. So it was 4 stars. I did The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. I've read other Joe Abercrombie books that I really liked. This one, not so much. It was cute, but I don't know. The humor didn't really hit right for me. It was okay. If the next book comes out, I'm guessing that it'll be a trilogy. He seems to write a lot of trilogies. This one's book 1, according to Storygraph. So I might reread The Devils and then go on to book 2 and see if I like it more. Because it seems like one of those where the learning curve might just be a high learning curve, which is something that happens in fantasy, and maybe that's what's going on. Then I did The Dust Child, not The Dust Child, by Nguyen Phan K. Mai. This one is set in Vietnam, I think. I don't remember much about it now, except that it was really, really good. It was a 4.75. There were some things that could have been done better that would make it more memorable after the fact. That is something that I do remember, like, thinking, oh, I'll bet I'm going to forget most of this. And I did. In the moment, it was really good. So 4.75 stars, rounded to a 5 on Goodreads. That would be the first of this batch that was a 5-star on Goodreads. And I definitely recommend Dust Child. So if you haven't read it, but you thought about it, it's also a pretty cover. Definitely recommend. Then I did The Book of Lost Hours by Haley Gelfuso. This one was a solid 5-star on Storygraph. So not rounded to 5 stars. 5-star book. The Book of Lost Hours by Haley Gelfuso. This is science fiction. It involves time and like how time and space work kind of stuff, and it was just really good. Yes, and I'm not going to tell you much more about it because I don't know which things would be unpleasant spoilers, but it's pretty and it was really good. Then No One Would Do What the Lamberts Have Done by Sophie Hannah. This one was an arc. So I did finish an arc. I finished 2 arcs, I think, in this last 2 weeks. This is 2.75 stars. The Lamberts have a dog. The dog is alleged to have bitten someone. The Lamberts go on the run with their dog to keep the dog from being apprehended by the police for biting someone. And it turns into a social media scandal event thing via TikTok. Can you tell I'm not enthusiastic? But it is true. No one would do what the Lamberts have done. This much is true. So, I don't remember if I've read something else by Sophie Hannah. I think I have. This would not be my favorite. But it was cute. It was silly. If that's what you're looking for in a escapist reading, I think it would hit all the right notes for that. It was a bit too silly for me and not in a direction I usually go. So after that, though, I finished The Incandescent by Emily Tesh, which is another pretty book. This is LGBTQ. So if you're looking for fantasy with an LGBTQIA plus whatever additional letters we've stuck on there now, I'm just going to say LGBTQ plus because the plus does all the rest of the letters. Anyway, nice executive decision there. Anyway, so The Incandescent is another fantasy novel that it has a really cool magic system. Yeah. 5 stars. Definitely read it if you've been thinking about it. Let me know what you think. I did a really good fantasy month, basically, is what this is looking like. Because I had The Incandescent, Hemlock and Silver, which is the next one that I finished after The Incandescent, plus The Book of Lost Hours. So, yeah, a lineup of great fantasy all in 1 week. Lovely. And then The Last Wish, which was also basically a 5-star. Hemlock and Silver was cute. It involves kind of a fairy tale setting, and it would appeal to people that also liked some of T. Kingfisher's other kind of fairy tale inspired fantasy. So this one's one where I'm not sure everybody I know who reads fantasy is going to love it. And I think I've met a few people lately that read it and it was just okay. So it's not full-on fantasy. Incandescent is more just straight-up fantasy. Hemlock and Silver is more fairy tale. But still not a retelling of somebody else's fairy tale. There are elements that are obviously from fairy tales. But it was really good. I gave it 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. The Last Wish I gave 4.75 stars. So almost 5. And then The Secret Sharers by Qiu Xiaolong. This one, it's supposed to be a mystery thriller crime novel. Not really a thriller. I think that's a miscategorization. I didn't get the sense that it was much of a mystery either. There is an inspector. He is doing an investigation. But it's an investigation the way the Isabel Dalhousie series by Alexander McCall Smith has investigations. It's not the same as a murder mystery. It is literary fiction involving an inspector in modern China with all the surveillance and state power that implies. So it's great for literary fiction set in modern China. And some of the things that this inspector has to deal with because they are working for the government as an inspector, where the things going on might be dealt with in ways that the inspector doesn't want to be responsible for the government getting involved. And also, information is very tightly controlled, so finding out information can be hard, especially if there are party officials involved in the wrongdoing. So I found it really good. I enjoyed it. The Storygraph listing for this says it's Inspector Chen Cao number 14. So this would be part of a series. I didn't get the sense that I was missing out a lot on a broader story arc. I probably would get more of a story arc if I read all 14 books. But it really does read as if it could just be a standalone. Maybe you get more of a sense of the crime novel aspect if you read them all, but I don't think so. I get the sense it's more of an episodic thing, more like the Nero Wolfe stories, where they're not really necessary to be read in order. Anyway, I enjoyed it. That was The Secret Sharers by Qiu Xiaolong. That's one of the other names I kept putting in the chats in sprints, and people were having a lot of fun trying to figure out how to pronounce it. Qiu, Qiu, Xiaolong, Xiaolong. So, not that hard, but it sure does look interesting when you're not expecting it and you're reading it out on sprint chats. Anyway. Then I finished Vigil by George Saunders. This is one that I was watching it. It was listed in our Hoopla as coming soon. And I happened to be on the internet the night that it switched over to available. So I got it. I was probably the first person that listened to it from our library. It's not very long. It's like a 5-hour audiobook. And it's cute. Maybe too cute for my tastes. I like there to be a little more substance to my cute. it was more of a morality play sort of thing rather than something to be taken too seriously. But I did really enjoy it. It was 4.75 stars. I might have liked it more than Lincoln in the Bardo. I liked some of the nerdy elements of Lincoln in the Bardo, and I immersively read that one, so I was looking at the play-like format while listening to it. So I really enjoyed that. But I think I liked the story of Vigil maybe more. In this one, we're following a girl, a young lady, who has become a ghost and has become someone who goes around and helps people through their last hours as they're dying. And she has some unfinished business of her own to deal with that she's not acknowledged yet. So, yeah. So she's sitting vigil for someone and dealing with her own issues at the same time. And then we got the BookTube Prize judge assignments. So one of the things I'm doing this year that I've mentioned before that I signed up to do is I am signed up to be a BookTube Prize judge. So I have my assigned section that I have to read 6 books and rate them. If you were thinking about being a judge and didn't sign up this year, you will see it's not that onerous. You should sign up for next year. It's kind of fun. So I haven't submitted anything yet for this round. I still have a couple more to read, but already I can tell you it's not that hard. You get to read 6 books in 2 months, which most people on BookTube could probably manage. And realistically, if you follow book prizes, some of them you've already read, guaranteed. So, in my section, I'd already read 2. I will probably revisit those 2 because I read them last year because they were nominated for prizes last year. So I will probably pull up the audiobooks and go through them again just so that I remember before I rate them all, like what I actually thought of them. But the one that I started with 2 days ago probably, was The Lilac People by Milo Todd. This one is really good. I had not heard of it before, and probably wouldn't have noticed it otherwise, but it was in my section that I have to read. This one is actually about trans people in Germany in the interwar period and during and after World War II. So this is a population that numerically they're not very significant, and they get overshadowed hugely by all the other stuff that happened with the Holocaust. So I'm sure I've heard bits and pieces about some of the stuff that this novel brings into the story, but never where that was the focus. I certainly knew about the color categorizations of, which people are considered sexual deviants and were, put in the concentration camps along with the Jews and the political dissenters and other people. So it wasn't just Jews that were put in those camps. And this is one category of people that when the camps were liberated, they weren't necessarily just allowed to go back to their lives, because the liberators had their own ideas about whether these people deserved to be out in public as free people. So that comes into this. I don't know much about the history of, outside of this novel, what that looked like. So that's something I'll be paying more attention to. And see if there's any readable history books that cover like the LGBTQ experience in the aftermath of World War II in Germany. So it's on my list now. I will eventually come across books about it because I'm sure they're out there. And probably more now than there were, because there's a lot of publishing houses that are starting to publish older classics that would cover that period. So, anyway. So as far as ratings, I'm not going to disclose any of my ratings of comparing the books to each other until after I have voted. I'll probably wait until my friends that I know are also judges have submitted theirs as well. But I can tell you what I think about the books individually as I read them still. And I definitely recommend The Lilac People. And if you are participating in any LGBTQIA plus events in June for Pride Month, this is a good one. Or if you need books for trans for the Herkid challenge for the the sexual spectrum element. I don't remember what she called that. Now that I'm thinking about it. Anyway, the one where you're doing all the different sexual orientations. I know I don't usually know ahead of time for some of those that they're even in the book. So this is one that actually, as soon as I mentioned like a couple weeks ago that I was having a hard time coming up with books about trans people, the book that I picked up just as a random indie author book, the main dad character was transitioning. Like, oh, never mind. I guess it's not that hard. But up until that point, I hadn't read any books that were centered around trans characters, despite reading a wide variety of stuff for a long time. And now there's this one. I think there was one or two others that have had trans characters. There might have been one in the New Republic. Yeah. There was one in another book I read recently. I don't remember if there was a character that was trans in War by Candlelight. But as soon as I was like, oh, I haven't found that many for this one, all of them are. And last year I was like, oh, I was so annoyed because every time I pick up an LGBTQIA plus book, it's always two dudes. Like, I don't feel represented at all. And then I found a whole bunch of books where it's two ladies. And so, okay. So now I just need to be like, oh, there's no books about people in the A part of the LGBTQIA plus spectrum. And then there'll be lots of them. That would be great. So there we go. I put it out in the universe. I actually want murder mysteries where the sleuth is asexual. So. I know that the Jacqueline Winspear, her books, the main character in that series, Maisie Dobbs, is said to be basically asexual. And I kind of can see it, but it's not a main plot point very much so far. I've only read the first 3, so maybe it gets more obvious. But yeah, if you guys know of any other series where asexual characters are the main characters, where their being asexual is part of their character, not just they don't have a romance, so that they might be asexual. Or demi, but demi is hard to discern in a book, I think. Anyway, maybe they talk about it at great length as being demi. Anyway, we're getting off topic so far at this point. Anyway. So at the moment I am 2/3 of the way through Fox by Joyce Carol Oates. I would say, and I'm not going to do a rating yet because I'm not done with it, but just off the bat, if you find pedophilia triggering, if you or someone you know has been a victim of pedophilia or related sexual abuse, do not read this book. It will be triggering for you. And if you want to try it anyway, read it with your eyeballs so that you can skip chapters, so that you're not being thrown into something that's going to give you traumatic flashbacks. Joyce Carol Oates writes several books so far that take on these big hot button issues. And when she writes these books, she puts you in the head of the good guys, the victims, and the bad guys. And when you're in their head, it's written sympathetic to that perspective. And in this respect, the parts where you're in the head of the pedophile reminded me very much of The Collector by... what is his name? He also wrote The Magus. John Fowles? I think it's John Fowles. With The Collector, you're in the head of a guy that's captured his first victim of what's going to be a serial killer spree. And so he's going through the transition from creepy dude to serial killer, and you're in his head. And it is a creepy experience reading that book. So then, take that, but now it's pedophilia, and Joyce Carol Oates really puts you in their head. So if that's going to be disturbing for you, there are other books. If you find the idea of this book fascinating still, just take it slow. Immersion read it so that you can turn off the audio when you need to. I'm doing okay with the audio. I also had some idea what to expect because I've finished several others of her books that are like this. For me, American Martyrs was, I think, the first one I read that was like this, where you're in the head of a guy that really truly believes he's doing God's work by blowing up an abortion clinic. And he's also really awful to his wife, and but you're in his head, so you're seeing his reasoning for why he's doing what he's doing and why that's good, and creepy. Insightful if you want to understand why people do what they do. But hard books to read. So, I will be reading something fun alongside the rest of Fox. Probably Blood of Elves by Andrzej Sapkowski, because I need some therapy after this book. Anyway, that gets us up to current. So I've finished 34 books so far this year. We're going into February. Ideally, I should be catching up to my goal to be on target for 500 books for the year. My guess is that if things continue as they are, I might be dropping that goal down to like 450 in June. But I don't get to change it until June, so we'll see. And we also have not had any competitive readathons yet this year. So, as soon as we get some competitive readathons, my numbers might go up. I just have not had that extra fire to light my reading. So, yes. And, oh yes, and the other thing that I'm starting to figure out how I want to do it is a readathon of my very own. So, looking at how few readathons there are that I would want to participate in February, especially actual like involved readathons with like teams and stuff, I would like to host a readathon. Probably not until next year, maybe not even until the year after that. I'm not really sure. I might do a trial run of like 2 weeks or something next year just to iron out wrinkles. But I want to do a kind of literary fiction, prize fiction sort of theme. So not necessarily literary fiction, because Hugo, Nebula, other genre awards would also be in play. But reading books that are on prize lists, and also trying to read some of those arcs that might be on prize lists. So I haven't figured out all the details yet, but I've been thinking about it for a while. And once I have my bookstore, I can start focusing on planning other things, and I would love to see something like that happen. So I will keep you guys appraised of any developments in that area. And I will, of course, also keep you guys up to date on progress on my bookstore. And guaranteed, once I have the bookstore and internet set up at the bookstore, I will be doing videos in the bookstore. So, yeah, that will be fun. Not sure how long it'll be, but the soonest I'm thinking will probably be like maybe March. My goal is to be in my bookstore by the end of the summer. So, March should be quite a bit before the end of the summer. So it's not something I'm going to be heartbroken if I can't make it work for March. But if we can secure funding, then we might be in our bookstore as soon as March. So, crazy, crazy thought. It could be so much fun. But I'm going to get back to my reading. I haven't decided if I'm going back to Fox, or I suppose I could read a little bit of Blood of Elves. Probably shouldn't. I also have 2 arcs that I'm reading. Language as Liberation by Toni Morrison, which is a really long and tedious introduction, followed by the text of her lectures about various works of literature from a lens of race sort of perspectives. So that one's pretty short. I will probably finish that soon, maybe tonight. And then I'm also still trying to finish up the Best American Science Fiction and Fantasy 2025 with Nnedi Okorafor as the guest editor, along with John Joseph Adams, who is one of my favorite sci-fi fantasy short story anthology compilers. So, yes. So I might read those and maybe actually knock out 2 arcs before I go to bed. So I'm going to get this video uploaded so you guys can actually see it and get back to my reading. And I will see you in the next video. Happy reading, everybody. Might have a TBR video coming. I haven't decided yet. But I will see you in the next video, whichever it turns out to be. Bye!